first off, the difference between unschooling and homeschooling, because I'm sure a lot of people don't really know what the differences are. Homeschooling covers all kinds of education at home. Usually people use curriculum, books. The biggest difference is that with homeschooling, parents decide what the kids are going to learn. With unschooling or child-led learning, the kids decide what they're going to be interested in and what they're going to do. And learning isn't really part of the vocabulary of, oh boy, you're learning this. It's mostly, what are you doing? What are your passions? So sort of just a little quick intro for everybody first to know what it is I'm talking about. Then an intro, I'm Debbie. I'm the mom of two grown-up scholars, like Marc Alexandre said. My oldest daughter is almost 25, and my younger one is 22. The youngest one never went to school, and the oldest one went to kindergarten for a few months. I came to unschooling through homeschooling, which is part of the reason I gave you that difference to start with. When I was just had young kids, babies, I went to the Lecture League meetings, and some of the people there were homeschooling. So I thought it sounded great, so I started to do it that way. I bought books, I had all kinds of things, but I saw the kids, sometimes they were interested, sometimes they weren't. I'm not big on scheduling. I saw how much they just sucked in knowledge when they were passionate about something, interested about something. So we just gradually shifted over to unschooling, because who needs books? I still had them anytime they wanted to, and my youngest liked workbooks, so every once in a while she'd do 2 pages in a workbook, and she was thrilled, and I was great, you're happy. And so we started out that way. As I saw how much they learned and what their passions were, an average day could be anything from staying at home watching TV. They didn't read books at the proper age, as in kindergarten. They both learned reading at their own pace, but we had books all the time. We went to the library every week, and we'd come home with 50 books. And, they're little kids, they're picture books and stuff, but they'd go through the books. I'd read to them, and they learned through the reading. They watched science shows. My younger daughter, so impressed my husband's boss at one point, because she was about 8 years old, and she was explaining string theory to him, because she'd been watching TV and found it so fascinating, and so she was talking about it. And that's how life went. It wasn't what do they need to learn and what should they be learning now. It was what are they interested in. And whatever they were interested in, we do. We belonged to science clubs. They were both Girl Guides. We went to homeschooling groups where we had a co-op at one point where there were different courses, and each parent took turns leading the courses, and your children went to whatever course you wanted. It was homeschooling, but whereas, again, the homeschooling parents decided which ones their kids would go to, I let my kids pick. And things that interested them, they attended. Let's see. Sorry, just checking my notes to see, how I felt comfortable with unschooling was talking to other parents that were, had older kids, and finding out what can they do. Because when you're first starting, when you're a parent, and it's, oh my God, I'm so far off the path that everybody says you need. Everybody says kids have to learn to read, and they have to start with basic math, and they have to do all these things by grade 2. And mine weren't. I wasn't teaching them. I was just facilitating whatever they wanted to learn. So it was scary. As back then, there weren't a lot of unschooling support groups in Montreal. I knew 2 other unschooling families in Montreal with older kids, and that was it. There were no unschooling groups. There were lots of homeschooling groups. So I had online groups, and I would go there and talk to parents online, and, well, how old is your child, and what are they doing, and, oh my God, are they succeeding, are they happy? So to get all that info, to feel comfortable that, yes, I was doing the right thing with my kids. And one of the things I found was that these kids that had been unschooled, if they decided they wanted to go to high school, or if they decided they wanted to go to university, they'd needed, in some cases, the SATs. So they'd spend 2 or 3 months studying, and they'd fly through the SATs with super marks, because you don't need from kindergarten to grade 11 to learn all that stuff. If you're passionate, you pick it up if you have a reason. And I remembered my time at CEGEP where I was in nursing. And as long as I loved it, I was learning beautifully. And then my last year, I worked in a hospital, said, oh my God, I don't want to be a nurse. And I still had one semester. And I dropped out because I went for the first 2 months and I found I just wasn't taking it in. So that was at the back of my mind with my kids too, that if they're not passionate, if they don't want to learn it, they don't take it in. And I saw kids in school, as soon as the test is passed, they don't know this topic. It's not of interest to them. So all of those things gave me the confidence to unschool my 2 girls. Average day, there was no such thing. Sometimes we went on trips. I organized trips to Upper Canada Village because they had passions that would last months. And my oldest, for a while, she was just fascinated with the time period of the pioneers in Canada and the US. And we read all the Laura Ingalls Wilder books and any other books on pioneers that we could find. And she liked dressing up that way. I even had a pioneer birthday party for her that year because that was the passion. And then it was gone. And that was okay. And you can't do that in school. You have to follow. You know, this is what you have to do, whether you're interested or not. The teacher's teaching about dinosaurs today. Doesn't matter if you already, know about dinosaurs, you liked dinosaurs 10 months ago. Now is when it's dinosaurs. And with the unschooling, they could do it whenever they wanted to do it. Sorry my notes are so disjointed. I had to do it in one day because we had a really rough week. Let's go back and see if I've forgotten anything about the why of it all. Get books, library, unschooling around. Oh yeah, and the other thing back then, trying to explain unschooling to people that didn't understand. A lot of homeschoolers do it by the book, do it by the curriculum, do it, even scheduled sometimes the same as school. So some people, though I doubt any of you will find it really hard to grasp the idea that you don't need school books to learn. You can learn from anything. You can learn from a walk in the park. You can learn from reading. I mean, most of what my daughters learned when they were young was from stories. You get, historical novels, you go to parks, you do things, and they've learned most of what they were interested in then. Now, Mark Alexandre, why I did it, how was it to unschool? It was fun. It was great, for me, it was great having the kids home. We got to do fun things. I didn't have to get up at an ungodly early hour for me, who is not a morning person, and get them dressed and get their lunch and get them out the door. I didn't have to make them do homework when they got home. I think it's cruel and unusual punishment to make little kids do homework every day. They're in school long enough. When they come home, they should be free to play. And I didn't have to do any of that stuff because they were home. So to me, unschooling was great. As they got older, they were Girl Guides, they were cadets, they were in homeschool plays, they were part of a choir, so they had all of those group experiences that school kids could have. Because when we were doing it, it was so long ago, there weren't that many unschoolers, and even homeschooling was more unusual. And people would say, what about socialization? Are they going to be in the house all day? Will they get to know anybody? All these things that, questions you answer over and over again. And they got lots of socialization with people of all ages. They weren't stuck with all kids that were 7 when they were 7. Because really, what is interesting about being with a whole bunch of kids that all know the same thing you do? It's nice to be with them, but not constantly. It's nice to have younger kids to play with, older kids to copy, adults to listen to and talk to. And in the case of unschooling parents, respectful adults who would listen when they talk and treat them like people, not like, go somewhere else, what you have to say isn't interesting. Because I find that in the school system and the mainstream, children are often discounted and they're not important. And kids are what make us. Kids are what make the society now. And I think they should know that they're important and know that their opinion counts from a young age, or how are they ever going to feel confident expressing their opinions when they're older, if they're knocked down when they're younger? I feel you can't just say, well, your opinion doesn't count. Oh my God, you're 18. What do you have to say now? You're going to vote. It's important. All of a sudden, you're important. And that's stupid. So growing up the way they did, they learned that, it's important. They're important all the time, not just as adults. And looking back, which is the other thing Mark Alexander asked me to talk about, no regrets. No major regrets. I sometimes think, well, it would have been nice if we went to more museum trips. And it would have been wonderful if we had gone to more conferences, because that was the one thing we missed. There wasn't a lot of close contact with other unschooling families. There were homeschooling families and much more rule-oriented, so that when the kids reached a certain age, we stopped hanging out with the homeschool groups because they were just too different. They had rules, and we didn't have a lot of rules. They had timeouts and grounding and all these other things that were foreign to my kids. My kids would go out. As teens, they would come back anytime they wanted to. The only rule, as it were, and it was more a request, was please, if you're going to be, tell me what time you're going to be home. If you're not going to be home then, call and say, gee, I'm going to be later. And there were times where they didn't remember to call till they were 2 hours late. And they still didn't get grounded, and they still didn't get yelled at, and they still didn't get any of the mainstream. Basically, they were people, and people of all ages, make mistakes, forget things, get busy, and they were treated like people. We went to conferences starting when they were teens, not quite like this because they're all unschoolers, and there'd be kids there from kindergarten age all the way to young adults and their parents. And so they got, again, to hang out with all ages and learn from all ages.